Hello, my name is Garvin and I read things and chatter about them on the internet for your entertainment. Well, usually. Today I'm going to talk about a movie I watched because we are looking at Lemuria in popular culture and we're going in the movies to do that. Sadly, I didn't find too many movies with Lemuria playing a big part in the story, but I did find the 1973 movie The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, which was also one of the many movies to have special effects by Ray Harryhausen, which I grew up on in the dark and dim days before CGI, and I really enjoyed those movies. I hope you did too. Let's jump into the movie though, shall we? The plot of The Golden Voyage is a fairly straightforward one. One fine day, Sinbad's sailors see a strange flying creature overhead, and one of them does the natural thing. Grabs a bow and arrow and shoots it for no good reason. This causes the creature to drop a golden amulet on the ship, which Sinbad picks up, and he promptly ignores the advice of his first officer and helmsman, who tells him, hey, that thing is obviously cursed, for the love of Allah, throw it overboard. Sinbad keeps it, and that very night it gives him a whole bunch of strange dreams and visions, which really only gives evidence for the idea of this being cursed, if you ask me. But these visions end up drawing him into a race to mystical Lemuria. Now, he's not alone. He makes an alliance with the Grand Vizier of a local sultanate called Moreira, and he also makes an enemy of an evil magician named Cora, who is also determined to get to Lemuria. Now, the Vizier has an amulet that locks together with Sinbad's, and they're able to use it to chart a course to Lemuria. The Grand Vizier has actually been in charge of Moreira since the Sultan was killed, and strangely, not by the Vizier. Yeah, this is one of those few times where the Vizier is the good guy. It's weird, I know. They also have the Vizier wearing a golden mask because he got caught in one of the spells cast by Cora, and that spell kind of, melted off his face. Being a good Vizier is rough. There doesn't seem to be a good health plan. There are others who get pulled into this race. A local businessman, for example, bribes Sinbad to Shanghai his son in a fairly funny sequence because the boy is right in the room while they're discussing this, and he is clearly out of his mind on something. The bribe is 400 gold coins and a slave girl, but to Sinbad's credit, the only reason he accepted is because he saw that girl in his visions, and he thinks that makes her important. It also makes her the literal girl of his dreams. No, I'm not sorry. One more note, he does free her without any preconditions, so I'm not going to be very harsh on the guy. He freed a slave girl when he had the chance. That's a good deed in my book. The son in question, by the way, is named Harun, and he gets more characterization than any other crew member really does, mainly because he's the only one with a character arc. Not even Sinbad really has a character arc. He starts out as a brave, heroic, intelligent man, and he ends that way, which is fine. But Harun starts out as a sort of lazy slacker and grows into a competent, brave person through the movie. So he's the only one with character progression. Everyone else is fairly static. I'm not going to beat the movie too much about this because it is 50 years old and this thing was not ever meant to be a great classic of cinema. It's meant to be a fun little adventure movie. So manage your expectations. Throughout the race, Sinbad has to use his wits and his skills as a sailor and an adventurer, while Cora is using underhanded tactics and, of course, dark magical powers. Because what movie like this would be complete without dark magical powers? Since I brought up the dark magic powers, let me get into them, because I really like how this movie treated them, and it's really pretty fun. So first of all, these powers are very varied and vivid. He's able to bring things to life, and he's able to see through other beings' eyes, all sorts of interesting stuff. But there is a definite downside to this. Using his magic physically ages him and drains strength from him. Like, he visibly ages on screen. His hair gets grayer, he gets more wrinkles, and the actor does a good job of portraying himself getting weaker and less physically able as he uses more magic as the movie goes on. And this also explains why Korra is so interested in the treasures of Lemuria, because one of them is eternal youth. If every time you invoke the demons of darkness, they're draining off your lifespan like it's a credit rating, yeah, I could see why eternal youth would be interesting to you. Korra also uses his magic in fairly indirect ways, at least on screen, but the movie uses that to stage really memorable fights and action sequences, like when Korra brings the ship's figurehead to life to steal a map from Sinbad's ship. He also animates a idol of Kali that's being worshipped by the Lemurian natives and uses that to fight Sinbad's crew. He's also humanized by having a really positive relationship with his servant Abdul. He's never abusive to the guy, or even, he's not even really that harsh. And on the flip side, Abdul is honestly devoted to his well-being. So, even in the rare event when Abdul fails a task, Korra doesn't torment him or go for a choke or anything. He just goes, hey, don't worry about it, you did your best, I'll take it from here. And towards the end of the movie, Korra even sends Abdul back to the ship because he says, hey, we're almost to the end point, but this is going to get dangerous. It's time for you to go and get the ship ready for us to leave. So, the Dark Wizard has an honest consideration for his servant's well-being. And it says something that a Dark Wizard from a fantasy movie is a better employer than some modern corporations, doesn't it? So what we get here is a fairly straightforward, and by modern standards, simple adventure race plot to the treasure, where Sinbad and Korra both have to confront different perils of Lemuria, one of which is going to be a giant one-eyed centaur, also worshipped by the natives. Those natives will, of course, turn around and decide to sacrifice our lead lady to it, and we will have an epic confrontation between Sinbad and Korra at the end, which ends with our bad guy being slain, and Sinbad turns around and gives the remaining treasure, a crown of untold riches, to the vizier, promoting him to king, and healing his face, because becoming a monarch is healing? I'm not going to question it. So, what I get out of this is being a good vizier is rough, but it does pay off in the end, whereas most evil viziers end up being slain. So keep that in mind. Now, later, our lead lady will question Sinbad, hey, why didn't you just take the crown for yourself and make yourself a king? Sinbad will tell her, hey, I like freedom more than riches, and kings aren't free. They can't ever just make their own decisions. In fact, kings can't even decide for themselves who they're going to marry, at which point, he and the lady kiss and hug, and everything goes to black. So, a pretty standard ending to a pretty standard plot, if I'm going to be honest, but it wasn't terribly executed. Now, as for how Lemuria is treated in the movie, it's a rather generic lost land filled with wilderness and Indian-flavored ruins, which is a nice change from Roman-flavored ruins, I'll admit. The only inhabitants we see are about a dozen green men. I'm fairly sure we're supposed to think of them as being naturally green instead of dyeing themselves green, but it's hard to say with the special effects of the time. The Indian theming does tie in nicely to Kumari Katam, but I'm not sure that was done on purpose. That might just be a happy accident. There are also some nice monsters done via stop animation by Ray Harryhausen. I'm not going to discuss that, though, because that's a guy who really deserves to be the sole topic of any video I make. Just be aware this is one of his movies, and he did a fairly good job in there. But Lemuria in this movie was mainly this vague lost island that may have been part of a continent at one time, and it's full of lost treasure and monsters. It's nothing groundbreaking, and if this hadn't been a Sinbad movie that was meant to take place east of Arabia and Africa, you could have just as easily plugged in Atlantis instead, and nothing would have really changed. Having said all that, the movie was only about an hour and 45 minutes long, and the pace was fairly decent. It didn't drag or outstay its welcome, and there were parts I legitimately had fun watching. But you gotta keep in mind, it's very much a product of its time. For example, despite all the characters having Arabic names and clothes, most of the cast looks like they come from places north of Switzerland. And this movie isn't going to be for everyone. Like I said, it's a rather standard plot that's well executed, but there's nothing special here. But if you're okay with that, and you enjoy Harryhausen's special effects work, you might enjoy this movie. On that note, I think this is a good place to end this week's video. I hope you found this video informative, or at least entertaining. If you did, please leave a like, comment, or consider subscribing. All of these help me in my eternal struggle against the dread Lord Algorithm. Terror be on his name. If you'd like a voice on the subjects of future videos, consider joining my Everwise patrons for $1 a month. There's a link in the description below. You can also buy me a coffee and just leave a request if you'd rather just make a one-time donation. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to give a special thanks to Big Steve, my biggest supporter. Could not do these reviews without your support, man, so thank you again. So, I did look around like I mentioned earlier. I didn't really find any other movies I thought were worth going into that used Lemuria in any shape or form. So, we're going straight to the books. Next week, we're covering City of Wonder by E. Charles Vivian. I hope you join me, but until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.